Welcome to today's meeting of Democrats of Greater Tucson. My name is Larry Bodine, and I'm the president, and I'm thrilled to welcome everybody here. Our speaker today is Kathy Hoffman, who is Arizona's Superintendent of Public Instruction, and she just told us that this is her last public appearance until a newborn comes along. So we're so lucky to have you here, Kathy, today. Kathy Hoffman is Arizona's Superintendent of Public Instruction, and she's running for re-election. Superintendent Hoffman has spent her entire career working in public schools, first as a preschool teacher and later as a speech-language pathologist. Throughout her career, she has fought tirelessly for equal access to high-quality public education, regardless of a student's race, gender, or zip code. Her accomplishments include launching a tech task force to address the digital divide in our communities, and to providing an additional $21 million for more school counselors and social workers in 140 schools. The last year has been a difficult one, a challenging one, with Republican demands not to teach racism in schools and Republican hooligans disrupting school board meetings statewide. It's lucky that we have a teacher to lead education in this state. And with that, Kathy, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Larry. Good afternoon, everyone. It's truly my honor to be with you this afternoon. And as Larry was saying, I did actually start my teaching career in Tucson. I worked in the Vail School District before moving up here to Phoenix, where I worked in the Peoria School District. So I still consider Tucson to be my second home in which I could be there with you today. I was very proud back in 2018 that with your support, I was proudly the first Democrat elected to hold this position of Superintendent of Public Instruction, and also the first Democrat in over 20 years, and also the first educator to hold this position in over 20 years. And I knew that when I took office, that I wanted to reimagine what the role of superintendent meant for our schools and for our Arizona communities. To me, being superintendent is not just an administrative role. In my first year in office, I traveled to all 15 counties to visit our school communities personally, including to schools within seven of our tribal nations. And I have many fond memories from my school visits across the state. And in each one of these trips, it gave me the opportunity to talk directly with our teachers, the principals, the superintendents, and most importantly, our students, to hear from them directly, what are you proud of? What do you want to celebrate within your community, at your school? And also, what are the challenges that you're facing? And it gave me that opportunity to connect with them firsthand and also to elevate their stories, because we have so much to be proud of, all the amazing work that our schools are doing to serve our families and our students. One of my most memorable trips was traveling all the way up to the northeast corner of the state, where I visited schools in Navajo Nation. And at one school, I remember distinctly, I went to the high school at Window Rock, and there they gave me a tour of their welding program. And I personally, when I was in high school, I never had that opportunity of taking a welding class. And I was so impressed to see that in this particular program, they even had a virtual welding machine, which I did not know was a way for students to learn how to weld. And the teacher there, the welding teacher, shared with me that if he wanted to work in industry as a welder, that he could easily make 6 figures. But every year he came back to Window Rock to teach his students there so that they would have those types of opportunities. Time and seeing our teachers going above and beyond for our students, like that teacher in Window Rock. One of my other memorable trips, going down to the southern border, down to Nogales, where I visited a K-8 Spanish-English immersion program, where the students were learning to be bilingual. And one thing that really stuck out to me from that trip was one of the 8th graders approached me and he said, "Superintendent Hoffman, I want you to know we are not just the leaders of tomorrow. We are the leaders of today." And I think that is so true, that in so many of my school visits, I am so impressed by our students leading, and I hear that from them on a regular basis when I meet with them, including on my student advisory council. Now, as we all know, the pandemic hit our schools like a meteor hitting the earth last spring, in the spring of 2020. And I immediately thought of our students in our communities with the least amount of resources in the most remote parts of the state. I thought of our students in Window Rock. I thought of our students in Nogales and many other places of the state where access to technology was a huge barrier. I thought of how our students in Window Rock would no longer have access to that virtual welding machine to learn how to weld. But our schools have once again shown us that they are there to serve our communities, to serve our families, and they have gone above and beyond to meet the needs of our communities. At the Department of Education, we have also reimagined what our work looks like and restructured by holding all kinds of virtual meetings and strengthening our relationships with public health organizations like the Department of Health Services and the county health departments to make sure that we're disseminating the most up-to-date, accurate information that we can to make sure that our schools can continue to operate this school year in particular, now that they're back in person, making sure that they have all the information they need to safely continue with in-person instruction. I have also hosted numerous educator roundtables. As was mentioned, I launched the technology task force to learn what the department could do to address the digital divide. But one of our biggest responsibilities at this time is to allocate the federal COVID relief funding. You probably heard bits and pieces about the CARES Act and more recently the American Rescue Plan. And altogether from these federal COVID relief packages for our public schools in Arizona, we are in the process of allocating over $4 billion to K-12 education in our schools. And to be clear, this is the funding going through the Department of Education and is not in any way influenced by the governor or his team. And our focus has been on making sure our schools have the tools that they need to support their students with in-person learning, but also to have the supports in place to support our students' mental health and to accelerate student learning, as we know that this past year and a half was very disruptive to student learning, and also to provide our teachers and our educators in our schools with the supports and services that they need to make sure that we're also maintaining a priority of educator recruitment and retention. Some of the examples and the ways that we've allocated the federal funds include adding 140 new mental health professionals in our schools. So that means school counselors and social workers in 140 more schools across the state, and that funding is for 2 years. Just a couple of weeks ago, we were very excited to announce a $5 million investment to create the first ever Arizona teacher residency program. This will be scaled up over the next couple of years, but we're very excited to get that work underway so that we can continue to recruit and retain high quality teachers in Arizona through a new innovative model. In terms of addressing the digital divide, we've made numerous investments in helping schools to purchase technology for their students, but also to expand broadband internet to our students in rural communities. But our work is just getting started. As you know, we still have so much work to be done. And even though this past year and a half has been unprecedented and challenging in ways I never could have imagined when I was first elected, I'm more committed and more dedicated to this work than ever before. And I continue to have relentless optimism for the future of our public schools. As I've seen time and time again, our schools, our teachers, and our community members going above and beyond to support our students. And so I'm very proud to be running for re-election for the November 2022 election. And I am once again running as a clean elections candidate. I had success with this in 2018, and I'm very committed to being a candidate that is very transparent with my donations, that as a clean elections candidate, I don't take any funding from corporations or PACs. I've actually already raised the seed money that I need to kick off my campaign. And so at this time, I'm focused on collecting signatures and also $5 contributions. One of the requirements of clean elections is to collect exactly $5 from at least 1,500 Arizona voters. So if you have not had a chance yet, please help my campaign with a $5 contribution. And if you have any other Arizona voters in your home, please ask them to also contribute. And that can all be done online. It's just $5. As was also mentioned by Larry at the beginning, the other exciting news for me right now is that we are expecting baby Hoffman to be here probably in the next week or two. So you may have noticed I'm a little bit winded in today's remarks. We are so excited to welcome a future lady leader into our home. And I'm already imagining what our public education system will be looking like when she starts preschool in just a few years. And then down the road, of course, can't wait for her to be registering to vote, to be a Democrat here in Arizona, and then maybe someday even an educator. So again, I have all the optimism in the world for the future of our state and can't wait to continue this important work of supporting our public schools across the state. And I thank you so much for your support today in my reelection. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Let's turn to you, Steve Linder. Go right ahead.
You saw that in the recent Virginia governor's election. Education became a major topic. It has nothing to do with truth or anything like that. It's the fact that the Republicans are very good at lying and creating a message. And it was about critical race theory, even though it's not even taught there. I'm expecting, and maybe you are too, the exact same process to happen in this state. Wondering what are you going to be doing about combating and being prepared for the onslaught of lying and whatever's going to go on in the next campaign?
Well, I definitely think you're right. This is not an issue that we're ignoring. This is something we're facing head on. I think we need to continue to hit on the message that we want our children to be critical thinkers, that we want them to, in our schools, have access to accurate history in our civics courses, which does include history, including slavery and topics like that, that while some may deem as controversial, is what we need to be talking about, the accurate history of our country, of our world, making sure that the information our students are receiving is also culturally sensitive and representative of the students that we serve in our communities, including, I know in Tucson, the issue of Mexican American studies has had a long history as well. That's another issue that we need to continue to advocate for. And Arizona continues to be the only state in the country with an English-only law. And I have year after year gone to the legislature to advocate that we repeal the English-only law because of it continues to be offensive and discriminatory for our students who are raised in bilingual or multilingual homes. So these are issues that Democrats can get behind and say, we want our kids to be critical thinkers. We want them to have a comprehensive understanding of the history of the United States. And I think as long as we're hitting back with the issues that we care about, and issues like free speech and these types of using these types of issues, I think that we can meet them and really energize voters on both sides of the aisle.
We have a question from Gail. Gail, go ahead.
I want to follow up on the question that was just asked, because giving out, nice factual information about issues doesn't work. And there seems to be a whole thing about the Democratic guy in Virginia really messed up by saying, parents don't have a say. And so there's whole groups forming now, mostly moms, go after school boards. So how are you going to do that?
I think by saying we are parents. I will be a new mom in just the next week or two, and And we do need parents to be engaged with their children's education. I don't think we should set ourselves apart or against anyone by saying that parents shouldn't have a voice. I do think parents should be engaged in their children's education, but what that looks like is where we differ. I think parents should be approaching their children's teacher, learning about their children's education, learning about the curriculum. It's not about parents. How do I put this? Our teachers are the experts in instruction and in curriculum. So we do need to elevate the teaching profession in that way. But parents should have conversations to understand what their kids are learning about, and the approach of going to the school board meetings and is not a healthy way to learn about. It's not a healthy way to have discourse about what is being taught in our schools. What we need to be doing is having those conversations even more between the parents and the teachers and or even the school administration, rather than it being this, big blow up at school board meetings where nobody wins. That's just a toxic type of conversation. But I think if we can encourage parents to be involved with their own children's education and learn about the curriculum, see what's being taught, learn about why it's being taught, learn about the Arizona standards, I think that would hopefully help to address some of these fears and concerns.
Okay, let's turn to Lillian Fox.
I kind of have two questions, if that's possible. One of them was, when did the school districts get the money for additional social workers and counselors? Do they already have the money, or is that something that's coming?
They have already received it. There were 140 schools that received that particular funding.
The other question is, are you willing to fund libraries? In TUSD, we have 16 librarians for 85 schools. So most schools have no librarian. The district doesn't fund libraries.
Yeah, and unfortunately with COVID, the academic achievement of our students has only decreased, especially for students of color and for students who are English learners. So I'm very supportive of libraries. However, in the department, we don't make decisions about how schools allocate their funding in terms of those types of positions. The funding for the school counselors and social workers was specifically through a grant program that we have called the School Safety Grant Program. There was a wait list. Prior to the pandemic, there was a wait list of 140 schools that had requested a position for a school counselor or social worker. And so the $21 million was to fund the wait list. We don't fund for every teacher or school position. So I would definitely encourage you to reach out to the TUSD school board if that's something you'd like to advocate that they spend their federal recovery funds on, because that is something that they could allocate.
We've got a question here from Lucy Messing. Go right ahead, Lucy.
Hi, Kathy. I want you to know that I've gotten all my family to give you the $5 contributions, and I'm still working on neighbors and that kind of thing. So we're going to get you there. And I know there's a lot of Republicans who are now entering the primary to run against you. Can you give us a little information maybe about who you think might be the biggest threat or the person who will come out on top?
So there are currently 7 Republicans running. I do think that actually will make it harder for anyone to really be a strong contender. We saw that in 2018, where there were 5 Republicans running, and they really split the vote. It was quite interesting to see that each one of them got roughly 20% of the vote in 2018. So I do think we'll see something similar this time around. I don't know if all 7 will make the ballot, but I do think that they're all going to kind of split the vote. I will say the person with the most name recognition is Tom Horn. So many of you who have lived in Arizona for a while are familiar with Tom Horn. He used to be the superintendent about 20 years ago and was also the attorney general. And he basically wants to go back to the way things were 20 years ago and take us backwards. If you Google him, there are numerous scandals associated to Tom Horn over the past 2 decades. And his rhetoric is truly against our students, especially our students of color. He's very supportive of the English only law. So that's an area of contrast for us that you could speak to, especially in the Tucson and Pima County that's a pretty stark difference between us. So I think that's something that you could speak to in terms of policy.
Let's turn now to Mike Bryan. Go ahead, Mike.
Hi, Superintendent Hoffman. We have several questions in the chat that I'd like to ask you, and one of my own. First, the ones in the chat. Robert Delaney asked whether experiential learning is still part of public education, and he's thinking specifically about field trips. Could you speak to efforts to make that more of a part of Arizona public education?
Yes, I mean, so during the pandemic, there was definitely a pause in field trips during that time. Now that we're back in person, I think field trips are starting to increase again, but that tends to be more available to our students in more urban parts of the state. So one way that we have also supported our school communities is by investing in Discovery Education, which is a virtual platform that does offer virtual field trips. So that's just to make it a little bit more equitable for our students who, if they live way out in Morenci or, parts of the state where there's not like the same types of field trip opportunities like the fabulous Desert Museum in Tucson, trying to make that a little bit more accessible to them.
We have a question from Susan Dante in the chat. She wonders if you could speak to the issue of Governor Ducey redirecting COVID relief funds or trying to do so to redirect those to support schools that don't have mask mandates or using them for private school vouchers, and wonders, as a result of that, in the context of that, what we can do to support public schools.
That is true. I have spoken out very strongly against these grant programs that he has created. So to be clear, he is using American Rescue Plan funds that's separate from the funds that were directed towards our schools, the funds that the Department of Education is responsible for. It's a separate bucket of money that he is working with. But that is true. And we have been in touch with the federal government on this. The US Treasury wrote him a letter saying that this was not an acceptable use of the American Rescue Plan funds because it's quite frankly putting children and the teachers' lives at risk by creating an incentive system for schools to not have the COVID mitigation strategies in place. So this is not taking any funding away from our public schools, but it is incentivizing bad practices that are unsafe for our students and teachers.
Rosemary Bolza has a question. Is there any statewide effort to help parents interact with their children's teachers and programs, presumably in a productive way rather than a yelly way?
I mean, it's a great idea like that I was just speaking to. I think we can keep pushing for that. I think the challenge is that Arizona has well over 200 districts across the state. And that's in addition to having 500 charter entities. So in terms of how we're helping parents and teachers interact, those local efforts are more impactful and more meaningful. So it's very challenging from the state level to be able to reach the communities at the local level.
So Susan Dante has a question. She's a former educator and a partner of a exceptional needs ed teacher, and she's concerned about teacher burnout. She wants to know what can be done here in Arizona to retain teachers.
I share your concern, Susan. And so some of the districts have offered retention bonuses to help on the financial side. We have worked with the state agency Access to create a mental health support for teachers. It's called the Educator Peer Support Program. We can put the link in the chats at azeducator.org. And that is to provide teachers or even school leaders like principals with a way to connect and have a local educator who's gone through crisis intervention training to help support them. I've also heard of some districts using their federal COVID recovery funds to hire counselors or social workers dedicated to their staff. So I've been sharing that as a model for other districts to look into, especially some of our bigger districts. The one district I know that has done this so far is Phoenix Union. I have also, in talking with some of our district superintendents, they have also made investments in professional development on topics like self-care for teachers so there's numerous examples of different ways where there's lots of really great attempts to support our teachers and prevent burnout. But I do think that the reality is still that this is a very challenging year for our teachers, especially when there's so much pressure to accelerate student learning and help them get caught up from the past year. So I just want to acknowledge that, yes, there are many types of efforts that we are supporting and trying to promote, but we are concerned about our teachers' well-being this year.
We have one more chat question. Shelley Juno wants to know, what do you see your role in fighting voucher programs here, especially STO and ESA vouchers, if you have any role?
So the Department of Education administers the ESA program. So we have been working really hard since I took office to make this program have more accountability. And personally, and with our policy team, we have stood against voucher expansion in Arizona because we do want to make sure we're supporting our public education systems using these state funds. So that would be my main role.
Okay. And finally, my question. I'd like to get a little bit better idea of what these $4 billion that you're going to be spending are going to be spent on. What are the strings attached to them? Are any of those funds already programmed? What discretion do you have over those funds? And how do you expect the bulk of those funds to be spent in our school system?
So 90% of that funding goes straight to our public schools. Then 10% of it is where the department and my leadership team has discretion over. So it's out of those 10% funds that I was speaking to, like the school counselors, addressing the digital divide, teacher recruitment and retention, the mental health of our students and educators. So that's where the 10%. So out of the 10%, the set aside state funds, we have already allocated over 175 million, and we still have about 150 million to go. For our schools, like I said, the 90% that they are receiving, the formula has been set by Congress, and it goes basically through the Title I formula. So the students with more students from more low-income areas do receive more funding. And they are also focused on those areas of addressing learning loss and accelerating student learning. It's very flexible funding actually for the schools. They can use it for infrastructure, for programs, for retention bonuses. It's a good conversation to have with your local school boards, asking them, how are you spending your federal funds? And it does differ significantly from district to district in the Tucson area based on how many students they have that qualify as low income.
Okay, we have a question from Joe Danishevsky. Joe, you're unmuted. Go right ahead.
Well, Kathy, I was really glad to hear there's more oversight with the voucher programs. Do you feel like you've made some progress in oversight and having them be more accountable?
Oversight of the charter board, the charter schools, is through the charter board, and I am a voting member on the charter board. And so where I have seen significant progress there is that the charter board uses a financial framework and an academic framework to hold these schools accountable. And so since I've started, there have been a number of cases where we have had to close a school that was failing, whether it was failing due to their academic performance or their operational performance. So we use those rubrics to make those types of decisions as a board. So I do still think there's work to be done that needs to happen at the legislative level by our state lawmakers, because what I would point to as my biggest concern when it comes to charters is that there are still some charter entities where they're able to have massive profits. So the CEO of Primavera profiting $7 or $10 million in a year is just to me unethical for any one person to be profiting this much from our public education dollars. So I think there's still work to be done. However, through the charter board, I do think that we have strong systems in place for the board to hold the charters accountable.
Great, thanks.
Our board member, Susie Anderson, has a question. Go ahead, Susie.
My question is, there was a piece of legislation that strangely did not make it through, even though our Republican group tried so very hard to have any civics curriculum pass through the Freedom Center, the Koch network funded organizations at ASU and the U of A before they would be accepted. Is there anything you can do or know anything that we can do to forestall the ugliness of libertarians deciding what we can teach in our school?
One of the first things I did when I took office within the department was create a policy, a legislative team. And so our team works very closely with our state lawmakers and makes it very clear we have our civics state standards that the department oversees, and advocating on behalf of our public school system. So any type of legislation that comes up where we have concerns about how it will impact the curriculum or what's being taught in our schools, we would definitely have a voice in those types of proposals.
Okay, Mike, let's turn to you for the final question. I'm informed that Superintendent Hoffman is retiring, and we don't want to put expectant mothers, so your question is the last, Mike.
My question then is, let's do a hypothetical. You're reelected, and in 2022, we have a Democratic majority in the Arizona House and Senate. What would your priorities, policy-wise and budget-wise, be moving forward to move Arizona out of the bottom of the rank for public education?
Thank you, Mike, for that. That's an easy one. And there are a couple areas where Arizona continues to lag behind the nation that I find to be very embarrassing. The fact that we don't even have full day kindergarten funded, the fact that only 19% of our 3 and 4-year-old kids are in a preschool program, only 19% is to me just so embarrassing. The fact that we are ranked 50th for teacher pay. And if you compare us to our neighboring states like Nevada and Utah, our teachers are making on average $10,000 less than the teachers just next door. So these are some of the areas that we need to continue to fight for, that every other state in the country has recognized are important for making sure we have high quality education for all of our students across the state. So if we could hit on some of those areas of full day kindergarten, universal preschool, and having fair and competitive pay for our teachers, that will really help the state move forward.
And with that, Kathy, I want to thank you so much for sharing your thoughts here today. I'm going to end with a final announcement from Christina Early, going to focus on our DGT election. Go ahead, Christina.
Hey, everybody. Just a reminder, December the 13th is our annual membership meeting. We will do the business of DGT, which includes election of our board members. If you would like to nominate somebody or nominate yourself, you are more than welcome to send those nominations to me. You must be paid for 2021 in order to run for the board, which will be in place in 2022. So please, if you are thinking about, if you'd like to run for the board, send your nomination to me and mark your calendars for December the 13th for the annual membership meeting. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Christina. Again, Superintendent Hoffman, thank you so much for coming to speak to us today. We wish you all the best in the upcoming week, and we look forward to supporting you in the election. And with that, let's cover a few announcements. So let's turn to Christina. Fill us in on the happy hour coming up in 6 days.
So everybody knows I put the information in the chat on our next happy hour, Drinking Democratically Happy Hour at Brother John's on November the 17th. We moved it to the third Wednesday of the month to get away from the holidays. So we're hoping that you will go to the link and get registered and come out and join us. We had a great time last happy hour in October the 27th. We had a great attendance. We had a couple of candidates show up. So I'm hoping that you will show up and join us for a fun time.
Thanks so much, Christina, for organizing these. I've been to every one, and they're just terrific fun. Let's turn to Kathy Ramage-White to hear about why you should join DGT.
Hi, everyone. This is Kathy here. I know most of you are members, but we usually have 5 or 6 folks attending that haven't yet joined. Now's the time to do it. Join. You can even run for a position on our board, and we've got quite a board. DGT membership is only $20. It'll last for a whole year. and it's a good place to be. So hope y'all can join, and you'll be hearing from me if you don't. So you take care. Thanks. Larry, it's all yours.
All right, thank you so much. Let's turn to Sandy Binion. Tell us about what's coming up in our next programs.
Coming up next week, we have Christopher Mathis, who is a candidate to replace Randy Freeze, who has resigned from the State Legislature from LD9. Elected PCs will have to make some selections and send 3 names over to the Board of Supervisors, and he is running for one of those appointed to that position for this coming year. Following that, we have Sandra Kennedy, who is presently on the Corporation Commission, and she's running for re-election. And the following week, we have Robert Werther, who is an attorney who is running for the Arizona Attorney General position. So that's who's coming up for the next 3 meetings.
And with that, let's turn to Lucy Messing. She's got an announcement. Go ahead, Lucy.
I want to announce that the Tanque Verde Dems this Saturday, the 13th, will be hosting Senator Victoria Steele, as well as our newly appointed Senator Stephanie Stahl Hamilton. So we invite you all to join us. You can go to our website, tanqueverdedems.org, and the link is on the website. We do have a waiting room to let you in. And also the meeting starts promptly at 10 o'clock and we are done by 11. Thank you.
And with that, I'm going to end the regular meeting of Democrats of Greater Tucson.